All right, quick outline here on Malachi 3:13 through 4:6. That God will set all things right. I want to give a quick shout out to my wife. Oasis has been taking the kids the last couple of nights while I wrap this stuff up. So please thank her for giving me the space to work on this. And then two, just God, I had less time on this than I normally would like, and God just was really gracious in opening up His text and letting me understand and see. So not really that's a shout out, I guess. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but it just felt like it was worth saying. Um, there's one last accusation as we jump in here. One last accusation. God says that your words against me are harsh, and they said, "Well, how have we spoken against you?" And God says, This is what you've said. It's useless to serve God. What we have gained by keeping His requirements and walking mournfully before the Lord of armies. Basically, we served you, but we didn't get anything out of it. That there wasn't. Well, it doesn't always provide obvious earthly rewards. That serving God doesn't always get us the things that we want here on earth. Sometimes doing what's right doesn't put you ahead, and that there's no promise that we're going to receive all the material gain. However, God gives us a better promise here, and that is that we'll belong to God. And again, this is not quite as long as I normally like to put my outlines together, and some of this might be need to be reshuffled a little bit. But I think that one of the things we need to consider is this kind of passage in here that we make a lot of statements about the fairness of God when it comes to punishing sin, like how is it fair for God to punish sin or justice or things like that. But we don't flip the opposite, like how unfair is it for God to reward us for righteousness? Like, who made us righteous? Who placed the Spirit in us? Who laid out good works ahead of time for us to walk in them? Who's purified us? Who's sanctified us? Who's called us to good works? Who's given us the life of Christ to model our lives? Who's produced good works through us? Who sacrificed and died on the cross to free us? Who richly blesses us with every spiritual blessing? And that despite all of this, we somehow get rewarded for it. Like, just how is it fair? Um, Yet after all this, we sit in a place of judgment to say God hasn't been good enough to us, that He owes us something more than we have already received. Every complaint about whatever our situation is, in essence, of saying, God, like, not good enough. Your mercies are inadequate. I cannot be content in your provision. Do better. And that's what's happening here. They're saying, we served you, and your blessings and your riches were not enough. They're not enough, and we do that in our lives. We never say it out loud, but we do that when God has blessed us in so many different ways, and we say, "Well, but I don't have what they have. I don't have this. I wanted this. I don't have that gifting. I don't have that car. I don't have, whatever it is." Those complaints are in essence accusations against the goodness of God. Um, but then there's such a beautiful piece to this is that God sees and remembers all that we do, in a good way. He says, you know what? I'll have a book of remembrance. And so many people have such quiet, wonderful giftings from God that they don't get to be they don't get to be or have to be, whatever way you want to put it, in the limelight. And it can feel like you're invisible, quietly serving, quietly cleaning up after people, quietly putting chairs away, whatever it, serving those, picking up the piece of trash outside, the things that nobody ever sees, but God sees, and He writes down a book of remembrance because He does remember what we do, and He will bless us for it. And it just makes me think of the passage, that not to be weary in well doing, but to I'm gonna butcher the end here, but to continue on, because in due season you'll reap if you do not faint. Um, so just those blessings. One other thing, and this is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. We so often quote Jeremiah 29:11 about, I know the plans I have for you, plans for your well-being, to prosper you, a future and a hope, all these things that sound really nice. And besides the fact that that's really ripped out of context and applied to Israelites, it's always struck my heart that the next two verses say that, I will listen to you. If you seek me, you'll find me. You'll search for me with all. If you search for me with all my heart, all your heart. That, like, why do we grasp onto the verse that says, "Hey, I've got, like, blessings for you," and we didn't grasp on as a culture to the idea that we will seek and find God? Isn't that the better piece of that passage, that we could seek and find God, that He puts us in a book of remembrance? And this is a question that is, not unique to me, but are we more interested at looking God's hand than looking at His face? Um, I forget his first name, but Henderson is one that speaks about this. And there are several more questions here. And then in the day of the Lord, this passage, chapter 4 here, the day of the Lord, we see, we've heard a lot about the day of the Lord over this whole book of the 12, but that it's going to bring justice and healing. And it talks about how it will destroy the wicked, but also He'll bring healing. He says, healing in its wings. The Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, and you'll go out playfully and jump like calves in a stall. And just the beauty of every physical ailment healed, every mental ailment healed, every relationship healed, is just a beautiful, beautiful picture. Um, and that justice will be done, that we can trust that God will bring justice. And then this final passage, and what I'll say is this is the way that I've interpreted it. I've only really gotten a chance to look at one commentary, and it did not interpret it this way. So take this for what it's worth. But to me, it feels like this is like, it's just like, as we close the end of the Old Testament, it's zooming back, right back to the beginning, all the way. It talks about Moses, and commands at Horeb. It talks about the prophet Elijah, these hallmark figures in the Old Testament. And then it says that you'll turn the hearts of the fathers and the children, towards each other. And to me, it evokes God and creating Adam and Eve, and calling them, children. And then otherwise I'll strike the land with a curse. And again, the Genesis 3, the curse of the land, that all this, it's like God's making a promise on the back end that, hey, where the whole piece of this narrative seems to fall apart, He's weaving it back, that there's a promise. And we see it like Luke 1:17, the promise of Elijah being John the Baptist, reconciling children and father, that there is a social connection here. But I think that this is drawing us back to Genesis. So again, take that for what it's worth. To me, there's just so many connections that trigger in my mind when I'm seeing this back to Genesis 3, and God almost promising to address all of those pieces, the relational aspects. This is the only one I only have one question for, and feel free to add more better ones. But, like, does the day of the Lord, does that strike fear or longing in your heart? Do you look forward to it, saying, God will bring healing to me? Or am I terrified of when God weighs my life, what He will find? And then ultimately, again, this can change depending on how we want to wrap the book of the 12, but God sees and knows all, and in His time, He will set all things right. Again, feel no obligation to keep any of this. Feel free to edit as you see fit. And sorry I couldn't be with you guys today. Hopefully I'll make one or two this summertime, but wasn't able to make it today. Have a good one.